Flynn out. President Trump's national security advisor resigns amid controversy.
What Mike Flynn was caught on was saying he said one thing and the facts were wrong.
We have reaction from Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma. Assisted suicide.
We have to speak out in favor of life.
Congress makes a move to block a controversial law in Washington, D.C. Fatima apparitions. One of the children who Our Lady appeared to in Portugal 100 years ago could become a saint. And celebrating love on this Valentine's Day, we get advice from a couple married more than 80 years. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, February 14th, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. We are less than a month into President Trump's term, and General Michael Flynn is out as National Security Advisor. The president asked him to step down, and critics say it's a destabilizing blow for the new administration. Wyatt Goolsbee is at the White House with reaction. Wyatt.
Lauren, the White House says that the president's decision to request the resignation of General Michael Flynn was prompted by a gradual erosion of trust. They say it was not a legal issue. But now Flynn's ousting is contributing to more questions about President Donald Trump's friendly posture toward Russia.
We got to a point not based on a legal issue, but based on a trust issue.
Press Secretary Sean Spicer explaining what led President Trump to ask General Flynn to resign.
Misleading the vice president and others, or the possibility that he had forgotten critical details of this important conversation, had created a critical mass and an unsustainable situation. That's why the president decided to ask for his resignation, and he got it.
Last night, President Trump dodged questions on Flynn.
Do you have confidence in Michael Flynn, Mr. President?
Vice President Mike Pence has said Flynn did not discuss sanctions with a Russian envoy in December, but Flynn later conceded the issue may have come up. In his resignation letter, he writes, "I inadvertently briefed the vice president-elect and others with incomplete information regarding my phone calls with the Russian ambassador." Those conversations would breach diplomatic protocol and possibly violate the Logan Act, a law aimed at keeping private citizens from conducting U.S. diplomacy.
There's a kind of internal discord.
Joseph Capizzi, a professor of ethics at the Catholic University of America, says it could signal a real problem with Russia.
You have members of the administration, before they're actually in the administration, speaking privately with Russian officials, speaking about sanctions that had just been levied by the outgoing president for Russia's possible involvement in the election cycle.
Spokesman Sean Spicer says the White House counsel's office reviewed Flynn's situation and determined that it did not pose a legal problem. Senator John McCain is calling Flynn's dismissal a sign of significant dysfunction in the national security apparatus of the Trump administration. Lauren?
Wyatt, what can you tell us about the people in the running to replace Flynn as National Security Advisor?
Lauren, for now, the president has tapped retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg to be the acting National Security Advisor. He is one candidate to fill the role. Also under consideration is the former CIA Director David Petraeus and Vice Admiral Robert Harward. He's a U.S. Navy SEAL. Lauren?
Wyatt Goolsbee at the White House. Thank you, Wyatt. Joining us now is Oklahoma Senator James Lankford, a member of the Senate Homeland Security and Intelligence Committees. Thank you for joining us.
Glad to.
Paul Ryan says it was right to fire Mike Flynn, but he isn't going to prejudge until there is more information. Now, Senator McCain, on the other hand, says, quote, "This is a troubling indication of the dysfunction of the current national security apparatus." Where do you stand?
Ultimately, whoever is standing around the president giving advice on national security on any other issue needs to be trusted that what they say is right every single time. If their opinion is wrong at times, obviously that's different than the facts were wrong on it. And what Mike Flynn was caught on was saying he said one thing and the facts were wrong, or he just didn't remember all the facts on it. That is very difficult to be able to have someone around the president in that situation that you can't trust the facts every single time. So I understand it. This is a person that was supportive of the president. The president trusts him based on his support and his loyalty, but you got to be also accurate on the facts.
Right. Democrats are demanding a special investigation into these links between the administration and Russia. Is this whole thing really about U.S.-Russian relations?
No, it's not about U.S.-Russian relations. With Mike Flynn as National Security Advisor, it's a trust issue more than it is something to deal with Russia one way or the other. And I know there's this big spin that's sitting out there saying that somehow Trump is connected to Russia everywhere, and there just seems to be these different narratives that are sitting out there. There's not some great connection to Russia, just like there's not some great connection for President Obama to Saudi Arabia or other things that came out early on in his presidency as well. This is just a sideshow and a different narrative that's out there. We need to be able to get back to the main focus we got to deal with, including a relationship with Russia and the rest of the world.
Right. Part of Donald Trump's appeal to the American electorate was that he was not a Washington insider. But do you think that that's now hurting the administration?
Yeah, this is one of the things that's always so interesting to me. The nation wants people that haven't been involved in politics and in government, and I completely understand that. I did not come from a political background. But when that occurs, that also means your first 6 months to a year, you're also getting up to speed with government speak and the speed of government and how slow it is and the bureaucracy and how everyone's watching your every single word. Those are things the president will get on board with, but that is a consequence of having a president that doesn't come out of a political or government background. What he brings, though, is working at the speed of business rather than at the speed of government. When you work at the speed of business, there's a lot of 80% solutions that get out there and you keep moving and you get on to the next thing. There's a lot of people that are interested in getting everything 100% right every single time and going very, very slow, and that's just not how this president's going to move.
Right, and that is what Paul Ryan said today. He said that he believes that it is reasonable and rational to improve relations. Again, but he is not going to prejudge. However, the question is, are you concerned that classified information is not being properly handled by the administration? It seems to me, based on all your questions about trust in Mike Flynn, that that's not where you stand.
No, I tell you, I'm on the Intelligence Committee, on the Homeland Security Committee. I deal with a lot of classified documents, and I know those need to be shepherded and be able to be guarded. There's some immediate accusations that came out about President Trump and his dinner with Abe from Japan, that somehow there were classified documents at the table. That's not been verified, but those are legitimate questions to ask. And just to be able to see if they're going to have a national security conversation, if that happens in a side room rather than a public restaurant situation. We don't know what all that is. Initially, the White House has said they were trying to plan and coordinate logistics of a press conference coming. They were having an initial conversation. We don't know that it was classified information that was hitting their table. There is a time to be able to handle classified documents. There's a way to do it, but you don't do it in a public setting. That was the immediate accusation. The White House saying that's not what was happening, but we want to be able to just find out and keep pressing on. And the White House needs to learn when they can have those private settings and when they can't. They might have already learned that, or that may be something they're going to do right now.
Sure. First 100 days, always a lot of lessons learned. Republican Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma, thank you so much for joining us.
You bet. Glad to do it.
And just in, the government's ethics watchdog recommends a White House investigation of presidential advisor Kellyanne Conway. This stems from her endorsement of Ivanka Trump's fashion line during a television interview last week. The nationwide debate over assisted suicide reaches the U.S. Capitol. Lawmakers are taking steps to block D.C.'s so-called Death with Dignity Act. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi has more. Jason?
Lauren, the D.C. law will allow doctors to give a deadly drug to terminal patients who have 6 months or less to live. Republicans want to overturn it, but Democrats are blasting the GOP, saying D.C. is not their jurisdiction. This as the assisted suicide movement gains steam across the nation.
Only God gets to decide.
The House Oversight Committee takes the first step to repeal D.C.'s new assisted suicide law.
The ayes have it.
Chairman Jason Chaffetz calls the law misguided and immoral. This issue is personal for him.
At that time, as difficult as it was, watching a parent die with a terminal disease is also one of the greatest blessings in my life, because I got to know my parents in a loving and caring way that I would have never done otherwise.
The debate over assisted suicide is playing out around the country. 6 states allow patients with terminal illnesses to end their lives with a doctor's help. 23 more states are debating it this year, according to the Death with Dignity National Center. But congressional Republicans are trying to put the brakes on the trend by stopping the D.C. law.
It's a huge step towards a continued march of trivializing life.
House Democrats say Congress has no business interfering
No, never.
in the District of Columbia.
Who gave you the right to sit there and go in the family and the homes of these residents of only Washington, D.C., and you stand there and dictate how they handle that situation? It's wrong.
Representative Steve Russell, a Republican from Oklahoma, says Congress has the duty to stand up for life.
And the Constitution is very clear. The District of Columbia is America's city. It belongs to all America, and therefore the policies and types of laws that are passed are under the purview of Congress.
The bill now moves to the full House for a vote. My sources tell me the Senate is unlikely to pick it up by this weekend. If they don't act by then, the D.C. law goes into effect. Lauren?
What are Catholic leaders saying about this law?
Well, Cardinal Timothy Dolan of New York says the assisted suicide trend is alarming and must be stopped. He says every suicide is tragic, but patients need real support and they must be shown they are not a burden.
All right, Jason Calvi on Capitol Hill. Thank you, Jason. And we will have more on this topic later in our newscast. Genevieve Plaster from the Charlotte Lozier Institute will join us and tell us about their efforts on this issue. The new Secretary of Veterans Affairs is sworn in at the White House. The Senate voted unanimously to confirm David Shulkin as the head of the VA. He's a former Obama administration official who served as the VA's top health official since 2015.
The yeas are 81, the nays are 19. The nomination is confirmed.
The Senate also confirms former professional wrestling executive Linda McMahon to lead the Small Business Administration. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says McMahon will, quote, prioritize growing jobs over growing government bureaucracy. As of today, 9 of President Trump's cabinet nominees are confirmed, including Secretary of State, Attorney General, Education, Homeland Security, and 6 nominees are awaiting confirmation. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. The brother of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un dies at an airport in Malaysia. Kim Jong-nam told medical workers before his death that he was attacked with a chemical spray. There's no word on an official cause of death or who may be to blame, but North Korea has a history of killing high-level defectors critical of its system. Nam did not get along with his younger half-brother who took over the country in 2011. An Italian court convicts a Moroccan-born man and his wife on charges of international terrorism. Prosecutors blame them for an ISIS plot to attack Rome during last year's Jubilee of Mercy. Vatican correspondent Mary Shevlin joins us from Rome. Mary, what do we know about the nature of the attack they were plotting?
Lauren, from what we know from the investigation and the court documents, Mutaharik received a direct order from the caliphate asking him to, quote, explode his belt in the crowds while chanting Allah Akbar. The court documents also reveal that Rome and the Vatican were both possible targets on their list. Mutaharik, the man in question, responded to the order from the caliphate by saying, I swear I will strike them in this Italian crusade. I swear I will attack them in the Vatican. At the time of the arrest of this couple, they arrested last April. Police said the attack was serious, the one they were planning, though not imminent.
The man and the wife, as I understand it, were born in Morocco, but they became Italian citizens and they lived apparently a normal life. Do you think there is now a growing concern in Italy there may be more suspected terrorists?
I think so, Lauren, just in the amount of numbers of refugees that they have taken in the last year alone, 180,000 into this country. Italians are very open, they're very trusting, very generous. So let me just say your average person isn't weary of their neighbor, but they're just, say, a little bit more cautious than they were, say, about 10 years ago. And we know that the president of the Italian Civil Protection Services, Franco Gabrielli, in an interview just last month when speaking about the security situation here in this country, he said it would be a terrible mistake to underestimate the possibility of a terrorist attack happening here in Italy. He said, we will have to pay the price here in Italy. He said that very bluntly. He said, I just hope it won't be too high.
Mary Shevlin, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Lauren.
The Holy Father's Advisory Board affirms its support for the Pope amid some contentious events surrounding the Vatican recently. The Council of Cardinals says it fully believes in Pope Francis and his work. The 9 cardinals from all over the world say their goal is to streamline Vatican operations. Pope Francis receives an invitation to travel to Egypt. The Holy Father met with Coptic Catholic bishops at the Vatican last week. The bishops extended an invite to the Pope to visit the country's president and Grand Imam. Coptic Christians are composed of Catholics and Oriental Orthodox. Coming up, little-known facts about St. Valentine and the push to make Sister Lucia of Fatima a saint. A new bill in Oregon could allow patients who suffer from dementia or mental illness to be starved or dehydrated. The legislation would create a committee to make changes to guidelines governing end-of-life decisions. Oregon Right to Life says current laws protect patients from this type of cruelty. The group says this bill would take away those safeguards. There's much more on that bill online right now. Visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com to read more about it. If Congress doesn't intervene and reverse Washington, D.C.'s assisted suicide law, then it will join California, Colorado, Oregon, Vermont, Washington, and Montana in legalizing some form of assisted suicide. Joining us now is Genevieve Plaster, Senior Policy Analyst for the Charlotte Lozier Institute. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Lauren.
So that means it would be the 7th jurisdiction. Then there are 20 others considering legislation. What is your group doing?
That's right. The Charlotte Lozier Institute is a research organization, and we are looking to provide the best data on this and examine all of the reports from states that have had this experience over the years and just empower the general public and our legislators to know this is a dangerous policy.
So you told me earlier when we were sitting off of the set that that the Oregon law began in 1997 and that you've gone back and looked at all of those annual reports from Oregon. Tell us how many people have died under this law.
In Oregon, since 1997, there have been about 1,000 people who have successfully requested and died under this physician-assisted suicide law.
In the last 5 years, also in Oregon, an average of only 2% of patients who died were referred for mental health. Why is that troubling to your organization?
Well, it's incredibly troubling. Obviously, we are a pro-life research group, and we value all human life, no matter the stage, no matter the age or capability. And for people who have mental illnesses or are depressed and have terminal illnesses, not to be given an opportunity to have counseling prior to requesting these lethal drugs is extremely troubling.
And they might not, I think, they might not have ended their lives is
Exactly.
the point. Is that right?
Yes.
Advocates for the elderly and the poor, advocates for people with disabilities say these groups are really vulnerable, especially vulnerable to being pressured to an early death. Do any of these laws have safeguards to prevent coercion?
The supposed safeguards that are in these bills, again, Oregon was the first to pass legal assisted suicide, and so it is a model for all of the states that have assisted suicide and is the model for DC's. And the supposed safeguards do not protect those who have mental illnesses, those who have disabilities. The way that the terminal diagnosis is defined in these laws allows for, it's very vague, and it allows for those who may, within 6 months or less
be dying, and then people can say, well, you could die now. That's sort of the coercion piece of it, and that's not really addressed.
Right.
Right, right. Okay, thank you so much for your time, Genevieve Plaster, Senior Policy Analyst for the Charlotte Lozier Institute.
Thank you.
This is a special day, but often misunderstood. There's not a lot known about St. Valentine. There are actually 3 saints named Valentine, and all of them are martyrs. You can read more about the history of St. Valentine's Day at ncregister.com. Pope Francis honors Saints Cyril and Methodius on their feast day. During Mass this morning, the Holy Father said courage, prayer, and humility are the traits that help the Church grow. Saint Cyril and Methodius were both brothers who spread the Christian message in the Slavic countries in the 9th century. Pope John Paul II made them co-patrons of Europe along with St. Benedict. Catholic Church leaders in Portugal say they've gathered more than 15,000 pages of testimony to support the first step towards sainthood for one of the children who first saw the Virgin Mary in Fatima. Sister Lucia, with her cousins Francesco and Jacinta Marto, witnessed apparitions 100 years ago. Her cousins died of pneumonia at a young age, and they were beatified in 2000. Beatification is the first step toward canonization as a saint. Now, Pope Francis is set to visit Fatima this year to mark the 100th anniversary of the Virgin Mary appearing in the town. Up next, the couple that inspires Speaker Paul Ryan.
They are part of one of the greatest love stories in our history.
And a marriage milestone. The longest married couple shares one of their secrets of success. President Donald Trump contends his executive order on refugees will help persecuted Christians gain entry to the U.S. But some advocacy groups say giving Christians priority might actually do more harm than good. And joining us now is the advocacy director from one of those groups, Open Doors USA. Kristen White, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much, Lauren.
Open Doors says the policy Christians first, is not quite right. It needs to be a needs-based resettlement program. What does that mean?
Well, Lauren, the program for decades, the refugee resettlement program here in the U.S. has been based upon need and vulnerability historically, and so that's what we're talking about. However, you know, we're really encouraged to hear the Trump administration's interest in protecting and helping persecuted Christians around the world. This is great. We just want to be thoughtful about the approach.
But you're saying needs-based. I still don't quite get that. Is it that they are sick, or what is it?
It's based upon the most need and vulnerability. And of course, you know, there's a massive number of refugees around the world, and only a few get to come to the United States or to other countries.
So these would be Muslims, you're saying, who are children, or should come ahead of persecuted Christians?
Not necessarily ahead of, but that the program still should be based upon vulnerability, not based upon religion. What we're concerned about is that anytime you start down that road of basing entry upon religion, it could take us to some places where we probably don't want to go.
Can you tell us why right now there are fewer Syrian Christians entering the U.S. than in the past year?
Yes, if we look at the numbers from the past year, there are very few Syrian Christians that have come in, but a lot of people think that this is more of a demographics issue. And
right, because there aren't that many.
There aren't that many to begin with.
Right.
However, there are also not that many Christians getting into the refugee camps. Many Christians that we work with at Open Doors and the Christians I've personally met with are actually urban refugees. They're living in cities like Beirut or Amman. I was just in Amman. I met with many Syrian and Iraqi refugee women living there in apartments, often 3 to 5 families to an apartment.
And they won't come into.
They're not going into the camps. And so we need to look at ways to get to these urban refugees and help give them additional access points.
I think I've heard you say before that if they do go to the camps, they're worried that they will be persecuted.
There is some concern about that, exactly. And so we have heard incidents where Christians have been targeted, and so we want to make sure that people have a safe place to go the whole process.
What is the administration to do?
Well, we're really encouraging the Trump administration to make religious freedom a priority within this crucial first 100 days. And I'm very encouraged to hear that Christians are, that we're talking about persecuted Christians. This is a great step, but we want the administration to make sure that very swiftly they appoint an ambassador at large for international religious freedom to help tackle these levels tackle these issues at the highest level within the U.S. State Department.
Ambassador for international
religious freedom. This is a crucial role, and we need someone in that role. It's currently empty, so we're encouraging them to take that step. But the administration, there are a lot of things that they can do.
Right.
This among them to help persecute
Great.
Christians.
Thank you so much, Kristen Wright.
Thank you.
The Speaker of the House releases a video message for St. Valentine's Day, praising former first couple George H.W. and Barbara Bush.
On behalf of the whole House, I want to extend our best wishes to the Bush family. George H.W. Bush and Barbara Bush are not just national treasures. Together, they are part of one of the greatest love stories in our history, more than 7 decades running, and we are keeping them in our thoughts.
Recently, both of them were in the hospital but have been released. And you know, theirs is a love that when witnessed in person is obvious to all in the room. But the Bushes can't hold a candle to this next couple from Florida. They're being honored as the national winners of the longest married couple contest. Horace Allen and Beatrice Ricks of Callahan, Florida, have been married since Christmas Day, 1935. For those of you who are as math challenged as I am, that is 81 years. Worldwide Marriage Encounter asked for nominations for the longest married couple. Out of more than 200 submissions, the Ricks won. They celebrated the award over the weekend, and when asked for advice on how to stay married for so long, Mr. Rick answered, "Just be quiet." For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, happy Valentine's Day. I'm Lauren Ashburn. We'll leave you with more of the celebration honoring the Ricks. I'll see you again tomorrow night. Good night, and God bless.